And joining us in the studio right now, along with Benedict Spence, who's been here throughout the show, is our chief political commentator, Peter Cardwell. Good afternoon to you.
Julia.
Now, you're here to give us the highlights of PMQs. Usual first question. We always ask it, because this is going to be a really short item sometimes. Were there any highlights?
There actually were. It was peppy. It was actually a bit nasty. It was definitely worth watching.
I love that you're smiling as you say that. Yay, this is going to be fun.
I love a bit of drama. Quite a lot about Angela Rayner, but there was an interesting... Keir Starmer had clearly thought in his first question he was going to get a nice dig in about Liz Truss's book and what she'd said, and even though Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, big rivals, he was going to tar Rishi Sunak with the brush of Liz Truss and everything that she had done, and what a lot of people disagree with, some agree with, of course. But it went horribly wrong for him, if we take a look at the first clip.
Absolutely. Let's have a watch and a listen to the first clip.
It's the only unsigned copy. It's quite the read. She claims the Tory party's disastrous kamikaze budget that triggered chaos for millions was, her words, the happiest moment of her premiership. Has the Prime Minister met anyone with a mortgage who agrees?
Well, Mr. Speaker, all I'd say is he ought to spend a bit less time reading that book and a bit more time reading the Deputy Leader's tax advice.
Quite a nice exchange. Sorry about the tinny quality of that. I don't know if that's just Keir Starmer's voice or just our recording. But
who knows?
No, but it's interesting because Rayner getting in that. No, it was so obvious, wasn't it? Liz Truss launched her new book. Obviously, we had an interview with her on the show yesterday. 10 years to save the West. Labour sort of rubbed their hands with glee whenever Liz Truss is in the news, because not a popular premiership, only 49 days is kind of the clue.
Yes.
And the view is that every time she's on the telly, it's good for Labour. But the point, I suppose, was really it was about the mini budget, which she really didn't regret.
No, indeed she didn't. And actually, it's interesting because it's been nearly a month since the last Prime Minister's question. It's been a long time because of the long Easter break.
I thought you were going to say since the last Prime Minister, because there was a point when that was roughly the news.
Oh, you didn't see the tweet from Jess Phillips by any chance? This was absolutely brilliant when Liz Truss said, I was talking about the initial days of my premiership, and Jess Phillips said, also the closing days of your premiership, because they're all the same. Yes. But no, there was definitely an attempt there to bring in Liz Truss as much as possible. The more Keir Starmer can talk about Liz Truss, the better for him, the worse for Rishi Sunak, even though Rishi Sunak is someone who clearly wants to be disassociated with Liz Truss's disastrous time.
I mean, there's no love lost between those people. I mean, I hosted one of their hustings. They weren't even speaking to each other.
Well, she didn't even shake his hand when she won. Do you remember that whole thing? So
exactly. Although when she came in for our interview, it had been established in one of the other interviews, she was horrified by Sue Gray hugging. She says, I'm not a hugger. So I went over to her and said, I'm not going to hug you because you're not a hugger. Am I allowed to shake your hand? Let's also have a watch and listen of another one of those.
Yeah, it's interesting actually, because a lot of it was just barbs. There was a bit about Angela Rayner, and you're coming for this working class woman, and so when you're a billionaire Prime Minister coming for a working class woman who's pulled herself up by her bootstraps, there's a bit of that kind of back and forth as well.
I want to come back on that.
Yeah,
yes.
But actually, the substance, the real thing that we were talking about, there's so many things you could talk about, Iran, for example, but that's something on which Starmer and Sunak basically agree. So the point that Keir Starmer tried to make a number of times was to get an answer out of Rishi Sunak in regard to the 46 billion promise to cut national insurance in the next Parliament. Where was that money going to come from? Keir Starmer kept asking. Rishi Sunak just didn't answer.
OK, let's have a watch and listen to that clip.
Is his £46 billion promise to abolish national insurance being paid for by cuts to the NHS, cuts to the state pension, or yet another Tory tax rise?
Mr. Speaker, he's really got to keep up, Mr. Speaker. It's this government that's just delivered a £900 increase to the state pension. It's this government that's already committed to the triple lock for the next Parliament. He had 6 opportunities. I didn't think I heard him say that, Mr. Speaker. And when it comes to the NHS, you'd much rather be treated in Conservative-run NHS in England, not the Labour-run NHS in Wales.
I mean, frankly, even though these are huge sums, Peter Cardwell, a lot of this is dancing on the head of a pin, isn't it, in terms of who's got the money for this and this green policy from the Labour Party, and who's paying for this policy, the VAT on schools from Labour to pay for one policy. This, I think an awful lot of voters are not paying attention to any of that. They're looking very much more at the big picture. But I do want to come back to Angela Rayner, as you mentioned, again, interesting, that Keir Starmer accusing the Prime Minister, you're a millionaire married to a billionaire's daughter, and you're smearing a working class woman. I mean, police are actually investigating the allegations into Angela Rayner and the sale of her council house, whether or not she gave wrong information on a birth certificate or electoral register. They can't both be correct about where she was living, whether she has lied about where she was living, because she claims, bizarrely, she's got 3 kids, 2 of them with this guy. She's married to him, and for some reason she's living in a different house, because this is, of course, a completely normal family arrangement for most people. What a load of tosh. 1 mile away, I doubt it. But also, the neighbours say this is where she lived, and it ain't the house she claimed she was living in. Now, there is now a full police investigation. The Greater Manchester Police, absurdly, the Chief Constable has done an interview with a local media in Manchester and said, half a dozen officers are involved in this. I mean, seriously, this is one person's job at best. Call into council, electoral register, go to the neighbours. And I mean, this is such basic stuff. I mean, the journalists have got this information. But this isn't a smear from Rishi Sunak. This is an accusation contained in a book which has been taken very seriously by many. And there are questions to answer. And it's entirely irrelevant whether she's from a working class background or not, or are we holding women from working class backgrounds who are from the north, because he's mentioned she's a northern working class woman before, to a lower standard than we expect of billionaires?
Well, that's a lot of people are asking that question, and the fact is that, it's easy to smear, talking about smearing, it's easy to smear Rishi Sunak for who he fell in love with and married. It's easy to smear Michael Ashcroft, who wrote the book, for being a billionaire. But actually, when it comes to Angela Rayner, she has called at numerous occasions, including for Boris Johnson to stand down when he was being investigated, not even convicted of anything, where she is being investigated. She said, of course, that she will resign if she's found to have broken the rules or has a criminal, some sort of criminal conviction as a result of this.
But knowing surely that, of course, some of the allegations against her, she claims she was living in house A when actually she was living in house B. But if she, on the electoral register, if she actually put the wrong address on that, A, that's not 100% proof anyway. B, you have to. This is something that can only be prosecuted within a year. So she'll know that. I mean, does any of that matter?
Well,
and how damaging is it to Keir Starmer? Because look, there's no love lost between Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner.
Yes.
Wouldn't he secretly rather like her to be damaged?
Well, he hasn't read the legal advice, and that means that he doesn't.
He has
chosen not to. This is the former chief prosecutor of this country who hasn't decided to read a very, presumably, fairly straightforward piece of legal advice on a bit of tax affairs, which presumably he's done many, many times previously. He's chosen not to do that. He's given himself the clear blue water between him and Angela Rayner. This is going on now, I think, for 7 weeks now. It's not going to go away. The people who care about it do care about it. A lot of people, it'll wash over them. It'll not be a big thing.
Benedict Spence, where are you on this? Because I mean, I've been sort of saying on the show for some weeks, it's a complicated story. It's not, here's a brown envelope, here's a wad of cash, and handing it to someone. Yeah, exactly. It's a complicated story. It doesn't involve, like Nadeem Zahawi, 5 million quid and threats to newspapers if they write about him not paying the due tax that he was due. I mean, he was bang to rights on that, and he was absolutely right to go, I'm never party political on this. I want our politicians to all be above the board. Lots of people will make the argument, this is a woman who came from a very difficult background. She was a carer for her parents, she became a single mum, she left school without any qualifications, and she has pulled herself up by her bootstraps. Despite her calling people like Tories scum and things, I actually rather like her. She'd be horrified if you all knew we actually get on very well. This would be very bad for her, her reputation.
Street cred, yeah.
But there's actually a lot to give her credit for. Doesn't mean it's okay to mess about on money that you may or may not have claimed from the council unfairly.
The problem is, if you're going to sort of frame yourself as a Labour sort of left-wing attack dog every time a Tory does something wrong, which she does, and she does very well, she draws headlines, she manages to, bring attention to issues. If you're going to do that,
the best opposer on Labour's benches, I would say.
Then
do
you
think
are.
So?
Yeah.
I think so.
She gets under their skin to a big degree. She really does.
But this is the thing. If you're going to make yourself that person, you have to be cleaner than clean. And you have to know, even if you are cleaner than clean, they're still going to come back for you because you are the lightning rod.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I think you're right to point out that Keir Starmer and she do not necessarily get on. And I do think that he will quietly be very happy that she is being taken down a peg or two.
She's being damaged enough that she loses some of her power.
It hobbles her slightly. Were there ever... I don't think there is a question over a leadership challenge, but were there to be, I think it takes her down in the estimation information.
But there
to a few
is a big
people.
difference, isn't there, between someone being a great attack dog in opposition and someone who, in a few months' time, could be the Deputy Prime Minister of this country. Now, John Prescott, a very sort of similar credentials in Tony
Well,
Blair's
she called herself
government.
John Prescott in a skirt.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
That's an image I didn't realise I needed.
Exactly.
It'll never leave you.
Cool.
Image, head out. But and she did have that role, but because he had a lot more, who want an expression, bottom. He'd been around in Labour politics for years, had credentials, And again, I still defend him for punching that guy through it. Again, quite darn right. What did that guy expect? And I had a lot of time for him. And there were times, frankly, when Gordon Brown and Tony Blair were bickering the whole time, actually, that John Prescott was the grown-up in the room.
Yes.
But is there an element where this does just, this just kind of lingers on? And even if there aren't any criminal charges, people will go, well, hold on a minute, you're a hypocrite. You've done something that you know is wrong.
Yeah, well, there is that as well, and also it shouldn't matter whether she's working class or a billionaire or not. It's if it's wrong, it's wrong. If it's against the law, it's against the law, and that's what they're looking into.
Absolutely. Just finally, I mean, this is a pre-local elections PMQs. We're going to see a lot more of this.
Yeah.
Obviously, ahead up to May the 2nd. Where are we on the polls there? How bad is it looking for the Tories?
Just very, very bad for the Conservatives, as it has been nationally for the last 2-3 years. Certainly, I think there are major questions for what happens for some of the mayoral elections as well, especially in the West Midlands. That's going to be very interesting.
Absolutely. Of course, you've got mayor elections in London as well. Benedict Spence?
Hope springs eternal for the Conservative Party. Who knows? Maybe they'll get a plane off to Rwanda, but I don't think there's much to look forward to.
Not before May the 2nd. They won't. Even they don't think that.
There's nothing on the horizon.
Gentlemen, thank you very, very much.